Okay, well, let's kick it off. Welcome to today's session on time management strategies. I think it is one of those areas which is so fundamental to businesses that getting time management right, it's really important for businesses, for leaders. It's that opportunity to find those gaps in the day to improve. First off, to kick things off, what I'd like you to do, if you could, is just open the chat in Zoom and just answer two questions for me. One, where are you? And the second question is, what is your most productive time of the day? I'll just wait while you punch those in. So, thanks, Rob. In the office and morning. Janie, thank you. Perth and morning. Catherine, Welshpool and morning. Janie's actually saying specifically 11 o'clock. Clinton, sitting in the home office and morning. Well, it's clear that morning's a productive time of the day. And Andrew, Perth and morning. Todd, Adelaide and evening. Thanks, Todd. So I think it's important, one of these things that's really important about understanding when you're most productive is it really has quite a big input into how successful you can be in terms of managing your time. Our session, what I want to cover today is 5 key things. Really, first off, what is time management and get a quick sense of that. Secondly, I want to talk about getting a little bit better in terms of the way that we manage digital distractions. Thirdly, I want to talk about the Pomodoro Technique, which I think is a fantastic little tool for really helping us focus and sprint through the day. Then I want to talk about the Timelog, which is a fundamental tool, I think, for working out how to be much better during your day, much more effective, much more focused, and also learning from the day. And then some useful time management tools to sit in alongside of that. So without further ado, let me jump into it. So what is time management anyway? I recently was talking with a colleague of mine, and his view is there's no such thing as time management. There's only energy management. And I think that's a nice way of thinking about how you'll use your energy of your day to apply to get tasks done. It's one of the key important reasons why I asked when your most important and most productive time of the day. But in order to manage your time, which relates to managing your energy, you need to think about and understand how you're spending your time. You may have experienced that scenario where you've sat at your desk, you've been working fairly diligently, and then all of a sudden you realise that you've just spent 40 minutes doing something and you actually can't recall what it is that you were doing. And if you do these a couple of times a day, you actually can lose quite a lot of time. So it comes back to keeping on track and how to do that. Being overly prescriptive with this doesn't work particularly well, I find. I think you've got to have an approach that really works for you. How do you then do that? Well, first you've got to consider what your priorities are. And coming back to your goals and your planning, a lot of organisations I talk to don't have a plan, don't have a strategic plan or a business plan that's guiding them in terms of their approach. With that lack of plan, you have a lack of clarity of what your priorities are. So it becomes quite easy to just go working on existing activities that you just do from day to day and just run into a flow of that. So understanding your priorities and working on the activities that matter most will really give you the greatest impact. As Kobe described them, these are the big rocks, and we all know the story of filling a jar with rocks and then filling it with sand and then filling it with water, and the jar continues to be able to absorb more and more despite students saying the jar was full. The important message out of this is you don't put the big rocks in first. You just don't have any real opportunity to get those things done. So it's really important to consider, and good questions to ask is, if there was 3 big things to do this quarter, what are they? If there are 3 to 5 really important things to do this year. What are they? They become your big rocks. You then break those down into smaller chunks, and they become the way forward for you in terms of how you prioritise and manage your time. The Pareto principle here is really important as well, I find. When you start to analyse your time, you can get into understanding which 20% of your tasks give you 80% of your success. And so, again, relating back to the big rocks, understanding where you can apply your time for greatest effect, because usually where we lose it, we're spending too much time in the 80% that only gives us 20% of our success. And then another critical point is that ability to learn to say no, or being able to delegate effectively. Again, that's a challenge in two regards. One, learning to say no. When somebody asks us to do something, there is a positive rub or impact to being asked to do something. It's a compliment that we can achieve something for someone else, and we often want to be able to do that. However, that does come sometimes at the expense of the things that we need to do in our own role to be successful. So we need to be mindful of that. And then delegation is so critical to be able to do that well. And it is a challenge. I often find that the key challenges around delegation come from an inability to feel comfortable in handing the task off, and the belief that the leader can always do it better themselves. And also, the second thing that I find is that frequently there aren't sufficiently well-defined processes so that it's easy to delegate. And what I mean by that is having clear steps. Doesn't need to be extraordinarily long, but having clear steps in terms of what needs to be done to get a task completed, and also what is the quality measure. How do we know that that task has been done at the right standard and at the right quality? So what I'd just like you to do is just pop into the chat box there, and just tell me which one you struggle with most. Is it learning to say no, or is it delegation? And I'll just wait for a couple of answers to come through there. Okay, saying no. Got 2 for saying no. Do we have any for delegation? Yes, 1 for delegation. 3 for saying no. Another for delegation. Should probably have 1 more vote, and I think that covers us all. So that's an interesting 80-20 is a big one. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. All right. So that's interesting. It's a bit of a mix. So one of the things I'd like you to take out of that is, whichever one it is for you, what I'd like you to do is to think about what you can do in the next 90 days to improve your capability in that area. Let's talk now a little bit about digital distractions. So this is an obvious challenge for us in managing our day, and it's also a challenge for teams usually, in that we get so conditioned to these digital tools. And it is certainly true that in tools like social media tools particularly, excuse me, sorry for that, social media tools like Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and so on. There are teams of engineers that are working behind the scenes to try to make you much more addicted to those platforms. And what they are dealing with is they're dealing with these dopamine hits that you get when you get a number of people liking your Facebook post or so on. And they're trying to make the platforms more entertaining and more engaging. So whereas once you might have spent 2 or 3 minutes taking a quick look at something on one of your social media platforms, let's say Facebook, now you'll quite quickly and easily find that time is stretching out from 3 minutes to 8 or more, unless you're really, really well disciplined. And it's not your fault. these platform developers have psychologists on their teams, user experience people on their teams, user interface people on their teams, and they are deliberately trying to manufacture that that experience. It's all about creating boundaries. It's all about working out when are those times that you can look at that content and fit that in. So let's assume that you're all quite disciplined in avoiding looking at social media, during your working day. Well, our next big challenge is email, isn't it? So just jump in the chat box and give me an idea of how many emails you get a day. By the way, this isn't a competition to see who gets the most. There's no prize for that, but it's just interesting to see. Right, so I'm getting some numbers in. 60 from Catherine, 25 Andrew, 30 Clinton, 10 from Janie. Rob's a bit more like me with 100 plus. Todd's 20. Right, so it gives us a bit of a flavour as what we're dealing with in terms of volume. And the challenge a lot around email and email management is that because it is unstructured, the requests that come through can be quite unstructured, and often it's an easy delegation of work from one person to another. This means two things. One, we need to be very cognizant about how we delegate tasks using email to others, because if we've got that right, it makes sure that they will have it right for us in return. But also, again, coming back to managing and learning to say no, we need to come up with a couple of key phrases I find are really useful in thanking somebody for the request, but being able to politely decline it. A nice approach I like is that if somebody makes a request to, for example, join a committee, join a board, or so on, I always like to make sure that I give it consideration before answering. So I will respond, thanks very much for that, flattered to be asked. Can I just give that some consideration for the next 24 hours, just to make sure I can truly commit, to see how that will fit if I do commit to that and come back to you. That buys you the time to really just double check, does that fit in with your goals or not? Excuse me. Email also needs to be constrained, and I think having boundaries is one of the great time management tips. Ideally, I find that when I look at email twice a day only, for no more than 30 minutes per time, and then keep it closed, I am much more productive in the way that I work. I find that that's particularly useful. Around the other distractions here, phone and so on, phone messages, email and so on, if you're getting messages from lots of different sources, that can create challenge and confusion and interrupt your time. The thing that you want to be understanding is how many of these things coming through are urgent and unimportant. So being able to manage those. Just jump onto the Pomodoro technique. I did look at this quite a few years ago, and at the time was a bit, wasn't as excited about it, I would say is true, than I am today. So the Pomodoro technique is basically, Pomodoro is Italiano for tomato. And it's based on the idea of a tomato timer running for 25 minutes. So what you do is you decide on a task to be done. You set the timer for 25 minutes and then you work until that timer stops. You then get up and take a break. So if you want a coffee or a glass of water or a stretch break or something like that, you need to physically get up, move away from your computer, go and do something different. And then in terms of the breaks, you do that for 3 times, and then you can take a 15 to 30 minute break on the final round. Sorry, excuse me. So why is this so powerful? Well, as soon as you click the timer, you find yourself at 24 minutes, 59 seconds, and you think, heck, I've really got to get moving if I'm going to get something done in this next bit of time, because I'll be standing up before I know it. And so I find that it really gets you to focus on what is it that you can do in the next 25 minutes to make sure that you're getting what you need to do done. The other thing I find that it works really well is you start to break tasks down into blocks so that you start to think about what's achievable in each of those blocks. Again, I find that's really a terrific way of keeping the focus. Third thing I find out of this, in terms of the way I work with this personally, is that it enables me to stay productive all day long, as opposed to for the morning people amongst us, which is pretty much all of us in this group. Sometimes, depending on what you have for lunch, sometimes you can get that post-lunch lull. And so I find using the Pomodoro technique enables me to just be that bit more effective in terms of being able to sprint for the whole day and get a lot done. It's a bit like if you're seeking to get really fit and you run for a minute, walk for a minute, run for a minute, walk for a minute, run for a minute. You can just keep that up for a really, really long time. It's the same kind of approach. Taking that break really, really works. So just punch into the chat box there if you're familiar with Pomodoro, if you've been using it, or if it's totally new. Totally new, tried it, didn't stick to it, would love a comment on making it a habit. Yes, used now but stopped, familiar, never tried, very new, familiar and tried it before. So, love a comment on making a habit. I think for me, what I found that really worked when making it a habit was I combined it with the next tool that I'm going to show you, the Timelog, and worked out whenever I would click my time tracking software, I'd click the Pomodoro app on my Mac, and so it just became a 2-click habit. And so that's really as hard as it is. And so then you start thinking of your time management in those 30-minute brackets, and it seems to works really well. So I find it's good. Sometimes what I find is that you might try using it and then feel that you get in the zone without having to track. Again, every time I've just made this is a constant part of my day. I find that this just gets me much more effective in terms of getting done what I need to get done. So my favourite tool out of the lot here is the Timelog, and the reason being is I've just found this tool in particular so good for getting done what I need to get done during the day in terms of improving focus. I once came into the office and I jotted down all the things I needed to do that day that all had deadlines in that day, and worked out at about 10 or 11 hours work. What I did was I jotted that all down on the Timelog in terms of the goals, when I need to get those completed by the deadline, and excuse me a moment. Sorry, just got a tickly cough. What I found then was that I was able to get all of that done. I actually finished everything I needed to get done by 3 o'clock, and felt such a sense of elation for being able to get a lot of work done so effectively, just simply by being extraordinarily focused. So how does the Timelog work? Well, first off, it's an A4 sheet. It's a manual process. I find that this, for those people that are very digital, I understand that, but I actually find that using a pen is much more tactile and much better for me, certainly, than trying to do this digitally. And so I'm doing this as well as time tracking, as well as Pomodoro. Might sound like they're a little bit of overlap and double up, but that's what I find is most productive for me. And certainly the feedback I've had from clients that have been using this is that there's some really terrific insights through this. So what do? You start off with picking goals for the day, rank them from 1 to 5. You might not have 5 goals. You might have 3 or 2 or 3 things that are really important. So you write down what the goal is, what it is that you need to achieve, a better defined goal really helps here. So, complete and submit tender, and then put a deadline on 3 o'clock or so on. And then what you do, and this is where the beauty of the time log is that you write down the time that you start the activity. Let's assume we're all early birds this morning. We all started at 8 o'clock. Then you write down what the activity is, then the time used when you've finished working on that activity. Note the priority, whether it's important and urgent, which is a 1, important, which is 2, 3, routine, or 4, wasted effort. And then you put a comment on it. And the comments are really valuable because that was where the opportunity comes for some self-reflection on ways that you can improve what you're doing in your business going forward. This could have delegated this to someone else. If I improve these templates, this will take me half the time next time. Got on and completed the proposal immediately after I left the meeting. That meant I probably saved an hour from when I would have otherwise come back to it. You find these great opportunities there. The other thing which is quite important here, and this is where you catch yourself losing time, is that you need to write down every single time you change your attention. Now, when I very first did this, I was utterly astonished at how distracted you can be in a workplace. It is just quite astonishing. And also the digital distractions come through. So if you're partway through doing a document and then you get a text message and you go, look at that, you've got to write that down. If you're partway through doing something and somebody interrupts you, you've got to write that down. And then you start to find all of these gaps. When you do that, you can easily find an hour in a day. And if you can find, an hour in a day, 5 hours a week, that just makes such a heck of a difference in terms of where you get to. So you can download the Timelog at emergination.com.au. Just go to the blog and just type Timelog in the box there. If you have any trouble tracking it down, please just email me and I'll send you a PDF copy. And then finally, some other useful tools. There are loads and loads of time tracking tools, note tracking tools, to-do lists. There are so many that are available on the web. And you can spend an inordinate amount of time checking all of these things out. At the end of the day, what you really need to do is pick a system and work it. I find that for me, I've got a few key tools. So I use Evernote for tracking notes so that I've got somewhere to put any digital notes that I'm taking somewhere. I also use for written notes, I use a tool called LiveScribe, but then takes all the notes digitally and pops that straight into my phone. I use Toggle for time tracking. Not everybody needs to track their time, but I do like to be accountable for my time, and that's the way that I aggregate that. And then I also use Trello for projects, particularly when I'm collaborating with people. I find that it's a terrific tool for easily working effectively and keeping content out of good content out of email and being able to track that out. Some people use Asana and just love that. I love that tool. Todd, I know you do use Asana, and there are a myriad of others out there. And this is for task tracking as opposed to managing customers. I've got a CRM separately that I use for managing customer approach. And this is a common approach that I'm talking to my clients when I'm working with them in terms of getting efficiency. So what I'd like you to do now is just jump in the chat box and let me know what tools you're using, software tools that you like, and we can just share those with each other if there are things that we'd like to explore. So I know we've got Trello showing up, Salesforce for CRM, yep, Evernote, Trello and Asana, Evernote and Agile, yep. Toggle, Trello, OneNote, ActiveCampaign, Asana integrated with Harvest. Was a big fan, no longer convinced. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting how our use of tools changes over time. So I think with those tools, I think you should be able to find that you'll get greater focus. I really find that using tools like Trello are particularly good for delegation. I run Google Apps for my business, and there's some great plugin tools that enable me to go straight from email, straight to Trello, straight to my CRM, straight from email, which I find really effective. And there's generally tools for most platforms to do the same thing. So finally, just before we close out, if you've got any questions, please do just drop them in the chat box, or feel free to drop me a line and give me a call afterwards. We're very happy to help and work with businesses to make them more effective. The way that we like to work with that is get clarity for them around their strategic thinking, either help them with a strategic plan or pick an area that they want to focus on and improve on and develop a plan around that, and then working with them to get those areas fixed. Time management is so important because we all know from the E-Myth that you need to be working on your business as much as working within it. And so to be able to work within your business, you need to find some time to be able to I'm just going to mute you there, Louise, thank you. So we need to be able to find that time to be able to work on the business, and it's these techniques that are here. So if anybody's got any questions, I'll be delighted to answer them now. Hang around for a moment or two and just see if we've got any questions. And if we don't, we'll close out the webinar. Thanks, Clinton. Thanks very much to have you along today. Hope you guys are keeping extraordinarily well, and I've got no doubt that you are. I'd like to reach out and catch up with you sometime soon. Oh, any thoughts on the sit and stand with Pomodoros? Yeah, great question, Todd. Thank you. What I think you're talking about is the sitting and standing desk. I've got a stand desk, which is one of these ones which you can push up and down. And what I actually like to do is I like to stand for a Pomodoro and then sit. And I found that getting used to standing, I would do two or three a day. And that would work really well as you built up to stand longer. So I find that works well. Thanks for the question, Todd. Thanks, Catherine. I'm glad you enjoyed the session. I look forward to catching up with you soon. Okay, well, that seems to be all the questions. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for coming along. Hope you enjoyed and got something out of the webinar. If there's anything that you'd like to catch up with, please let me know. Louise, yes, this webinar will be available later to watch, and we'll get a link to you. Thanks, Andrew. Have a terrific day. So thanks, everyone, and look forward to your productivity. See you soon. Thanks, Louise.